Oh, thank you. This is going to be the second half of our Rocky Mountain Outreach Interest Group meeting. And for this opportunity, I've invited 3 staff from libraries across the state to share their experience with delivering the library without a large bookmobile. Um, there's a lot of great opportunities that we can take from this to learn how we can deliver the library without all the bells and whistles. Um, and I want to applaud their creativity in doing so. I'm going to start off with introducing the 3 people speaking, and this is going to be in a panelist format. So I'll be asking them each questions in turn. And then we'll have a discussion as well. You can ask your questions in the chat, and I will address them to our panelists. So our first panelist I wanted to introduce is Angelica Velasco from Lafayette, Colorado.
Hi there. I'm Angelique Velasco, and I'm from Lafayette Public Library. And I've been with the library for about 6 years, all the way from materials handler, all the way through associate assistant, and finally to community outreach, which is something I am so proud of the work that we do. We take so much out into the community. And I just, one of the biggest things I find is that has helped our programs continue is really the consistency. And that is definitely one thing when our programming can be in danger of getting removed from programming. I think because the numbers, it's the consistency, and it's also like one of the presenters shared before is really asking the community who is coming to the events or benefiting from the services that they share their point of view. And that really speaks so much to the folks on the business side of it through the city, as well as staff at the library that we're trying to plan programming.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce Claire Mattoon from Bemis Library in Littleton, Colorado.
I'm Claire Mattoon, and I've been with the Bemis Library for a decade. I actually started here as an intern and just never left, so they kept finding me new things to do. Currently, I'm the senior librarian for programming and outreach for the Adult Services Division. We just launched a bookmobile, but it's a transit van, so definitely still fits under the not a large vehicle option. But prior to that, we had several different models of community delivery and outreach services. I look forward to talking about some of those and then how we actually managed to leverage that experience into a matching grant to get our new bookmobile.
Thank you. And finally, but definitely not the least, we have Mindy McGurk from Aurora Public Library.
Hi, my name is Minda, and actually I am bringing my team in on this. I have Stacy and Adam. Since I am fairly new, they have been the experts at this for the last 4 years. Similar to Claire, we also just launched a bookmobile, which has been lovely because we've sort of been able to measure these differences and see how the bookmobile benefits us and sometimes doesn't. So we are still continuing a lot of our community engagement with without using the bookmobile because there are a lot of places that we go that does not accommodate a bookmobile. So they'll be sharing that with us. Also, for intents and purposes, you will hear me say probably community engagement sometimes more frequently than I say outreach because our director does not like us to count outreach numbers. We count them all as programs. So we've had to change our verbiage a little bit, but I'll try to flip back and forth with that.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So first question I'll have, and I'll continue this order through our panelists. So you know when it'll be your time to answer the question. So the first question I have started with Angelique. Apologies if I don't get your name right, by the way, for all of us. I'll do my best. Which is your favorite program that you'd like to share today, and what does that program look like on a typical day?
Sure. So I'm going to speak about our senior centers, and they're more actual residential facilities for folks. And these are folks who are mostly homebound and aren't able to leave for different purposes. And we go to Josephine Commons, and then we also go over to the Peaks. The Peaks is newer for us this last few months. One of the things I really love for it, and the reason I spoke about consistency with that outreach program, is because as you have different managers come through, there's different ideas of what parts of the community to reach out to. And I think hearing from the community you're serving and encouraging them to share that really keeps your program relevant. And that's what's happened with our senior centers, is that was in danger of being cut. And we have really built up the numbers just by that consistency. We go to Josephine Commons twice a month, and we're there during the lunchtime, which is where Meals on Wheels is also. So we have folks who live on site and then folks who come just for the Meals on Wheels, which has really also helped engage some of the folks who may not have been using the library. And we have some voracious readers, I have to say. And one of the biggest things I love about going to Josephine Commons is that you get to know folks and you really are learning their interests and almost also curating books for them. So we put a lot of books on hold. I bring my computer and we're looking for books while we're there with them. I try in the interim of going to the senior centers is learning books that they might, I anticipate what they might want to read. And also a lot of them have learned to also put items on hold for themselves. So like our speaker was saying earlier, that the technology is accessible to everyone. A lot of them have shown interest in Libby. So that is also wonderful. The large print has been a huge success. We've bought more recently in our catalog. We've invested a lot more in our large print, and there's a lot of feedback on that's been very popular. So I would say it's definitely the senior centers. There's a lot of appreciation. There's a lot of, learning, whether it's audiobooks, or we've also brought one of our archivists from the library with us a few times. And so there is interest in the history of their families, in the history of Lafayette. And so she brings a lot of material on her computer and does ancestry with them. So that has really expanded the program as well, now that she comes with us maybe once a month. And the folks really enjoy her visit, and it's just show that they can access the services. Sometimes it just means a little one-on-one and building up that program and being present. And those who come at first may be shy and think, oh, they say it's so much work for you all, but they see that we're there for them, and then we start building relationship.
Thank you. Claire Mattoon.
Yes.
What is your favorite program that you're delivering to the people in Littleton, and how does that look in a typical day?
So again, we're in the transition period right now, moving services to the Bookmobile model. But I can talk a little bit about sort of several iterations of the service. Pre-COVID, we had what we called a pop-up library. Also at the senior centers, where we took materials. We borrowed a van from the museum across the street and took big rolling totes of books out to several of the senior residences in Littleton once a month. And that has sort of been what we've built our Bookmobile model on, then is that same audience, re-engaging with them. During COVID, we had moved some of those folks onto a modified homebound service. So our requirements for them to participate were less stringent than usually. To be a part of our homebound program, they need to have a disability that prevents them from accessing the library, just because we are, we're short staffed and we're short volunteered, and we needed to have a way to limit the participation. During COVID, we expanded that to permit folks who just were not comfortable coming to the library with health concerns and things. And I think because we were able to be that flexible with that program, we maintained the connections with a lot of those folks. So as we have reintroduced the wider service via the Bookmobile, the people who had maintained a connection with us doing the doorstep service through COVID have been a ready-made audience for us to move on to the Bookmobile. Some of the challenges of that have been they got very accustomed to having a very personalized service during the pandemic. We had a staff member who really pampered those patrons in a wonderful way. I kept lists of all their preferred reading types, went through, placed holds for them herself, did a lot of individual curation. That's not a sustainable model for us, so we've had some opportunities for learning with folks on how they can do that for themselves, the tools that we can provide, making them aware that they can call the library and talk to any library staff and put items on hold to pick up on the Bookmobile, ask for readers advisory, that the staff members who are on the Bookmobile are going to be very familiar with the collection and able to provide those services. But it's definitely been an ongoing conversation the last couple months, just adjusting those expectations, but then also emphasizing how much more we're able to do for them with the Bookmobile than we could do when it was a homebound model, because the homebound model is so much more staff intensive, and just making it really clear to them that, we were limited. We couldn't add any more to it. So all of your friends in your same residence, they couldn't take advantage of it because we didn't have any more room in the program. But now you can tell everybody to come down. And it used to feel like Christmas when we bring you your bag of books, but now Christmas is getting on the Bookmobile and seeing everything that there is. And so it's been a really good conversation to have. Like I said, we're still building out our procedures for that. We'll have a full-time Bookmobile assistant starting soon. And at that point, we'll expand out beyond the stops that we had already established. Previously, we'll be providing services to a local secondary school that does not have a school library, and will become their de facto school library, providing services to some of the neighborhoods where there's a high population density, but we've looked at the GIS data and see that they don't have library cards. And so making sure that they know that there's a library, or if there are transportation challenges with getting over to us, that we are there for them. So my favorite program is just the fact that we're building this program. I don't yet have the day-to-day, but it's a really exciting time for us to be able to customize this to our community.
So a big part of this is a follow-up question for Claire. In the past, you would be putting stuff in the car and driving it to a location, just as Angelique is doing.
Yes, we bought several sets of those big rolling toolboxes from Home Depot that stack up the rigid toolboxes, and we would load those up with materials, some purchased specifically for outreach, some things that we were pulling from the shelves on a monthly basis. We would load about 8 of those into the back of a museum van, haul them over there, unload them, set up tables, put out books. Very, very labor intensive. And we would be able to take, maybe 300 or 400 books at a time. And now on the Bookmobile, we have several thousand. And it's, switching out the collection on the Bookmobile to tailor it for an audience. Yeah, that takes some work, but we won't be swapping the entire collection every time we go out. And it's a lot less physical effort. Those toolboxes were heavy.
Minda from Aurora, you said that you're going to bring in other people who can share their experience, or?
Yes. So Adam and Stacy are on with me right now, and I'll let them kind of take over this in a moment. But I think Claire touched on a lot of things that we've also discovered, is that continuing to commit to your communities is much easier with a large vehicle that can hold mass amounts of things. However, we have also seen that it can also be limiting, and we still have a lot of locations that we cannot serve with the Bookmobile. So I'll let Adam and Stacy touch on that if you guys want to chime in.
So I'll go ahead and start with that one. My name is Adam. I'm one of the Bookmobile folks here at Aurora. So there's two programs I'll touch on for this. The first one is Buckley Space Force Base. We do a program called Books on Wheels that began in January of 22. And that one's actually a transitional program. So it took us nearly 6 months to just figure out base access, as well as a place to set up, places we could and couldn't be, the logistics of that with an ever-changing audience on the base. At that time, we did not have the Bookmobile, so our situation was very similar to Claire's. We would load up a transit van with several tables, and we actually bought several of these cardboard, or sorry, not cardboard, these plywood boxes from like a Joann's or a Michael's because they could stack. And so we would then put 12 to 14 in there, and we'd do like little pyramids all over the tables. And then we'd have our flyers out. We would count everything by hand. So another one of the challenges to that is there's no Sierra access. There's no immediate making of library cards. So when folks come up to you, you have to write down everything the old-fashioned way and then enter it the following morning, which can sometimes be a challenge as well if a patron sees you earlier in the day and then immediately wants to use their card, check out additional material online, what have you. In the more recent months with the Bookmobile, that service has gotten exponentially better from a quality of life standpoint, simply from a load in, load out, as well as from a sheer volume of material that we can now offer. A second one I will touch on because Jacob asked about rewarding programs. One of the ones that's near and dear to me is the vet's home up the street from us on the campus Van Shoots Medical Campus. And part of the reason for that is that that's very much my hospice situation. People don't leave their rooms except to just go down the hall. And so we have individuals there that we actually prepare a book box for each time, where we show up and basically trade out a bin of anywhere from 8 to 10 books at a time. Since we can't spend much time in the rooms, that one's very limiting for a Bookmobile, both for parking lot considerations. It's a tiny lot that's located on the medical campus, but also from a ability of us to haul things in and out. We still have to do the basic COVID screening there. We have to take extra precautions because of folks' situations inside. It's a room-to-room service that's on a list, so they hand us a list of residents that would like to see us each time we are in there. All of that is a challenge to it, but also part of what makes it rewarding because it's able to get very personal. You hear about what's going on with residents when you talk to them in the facility.
Wow, what a great program. Thank you for sharing that. Sounds really exciting. Did Stacy want to add anything to that?
I think Adam got most of it, but hello, I'm Stacy. My other favorite outreach that we do is, like Angelique said, is visiting the senior homes. It's a really great way to build community bonds, and everyone starts to know each other, and it's just like a really great environment.
Thank you for sharing that.
Similar to what Claire mentioned as well. Now, having the Bookmobile, we are now operating as multiple schools' libraries. We have a lot of schools now here in Aurora that have gotten rid of their libraries or were built without them. And so we are now operating as the library for multiple schools.
Some of you touched on how your program first started, but sorry if I missed. Oh, sorry, the Aurora programs you mentioned 2022, so I think I caught that. Claire, do you know when Bemis first started going into your senior community centers?
Yes. Or at least I know when I started, because I inherited the program actually when I started almost a decade ago. It was very, very, very minimal at that point. It was almost more of a book club where each of the different places there were maybe 20 or 30 residents that were very interested. And so we would take 50 to 60 books, and it was almost more like a book talk. We'd have a little annotated bibliography. They would sit around the table. We'd tell them what we brought, and then they would keep it, and everybody just had a binder where they would sign it out for the month. And then when we came back, we would take. So it was not a formal checkout. We would actually check the books out to the facility, and then it was sort of an honor system that we got most of the things back. There were a few things that wandered off. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, we moved to the pop-up library system. And that was the point when we moved on to Sierra. And then actually we were able to do a remote version of Sierra. And that was when we could start really checking out to individual patrons, placing holds for people instead of having to find a more general interest collection of titles, and expanded how many we took. And then the Bookmobile, of course, we've just started that. Our first run was in April. So we're 3 months into that.
It's amazing to hear how much it's grown and changed. In just a short amount of time. You said in the last 10 years. I'm going to swing back to Angelique with our next question. What is the biggest challenge you've had in starting or continuing this service?
Well, we are a small operation, so I just take my vehicle and a wagon, and we have those great little grocery boxes that fold out, and we fill 3 of those. And I think it's the transportation. The partners that we work with, they usually try to have a table for us, for it's one less thing that we have to carry, but having those wagons for us is huge. Even though we're small library, small operation, we're still able to get quite a bit of books to folks and have a wide range of interests as well. It does allow us that one-on-one, but the challenge is for sure having the staffing to do that load back and forth. We take turns with myself and one other staff member. But I think what drives it is just that they're so in need of that connection and so in need of having new materials. And one thing that I focus on, because we do go to Josephine Commons twice a month, is that we try to get them the new materials. I try to take the book pages out, and so we can talk about books that they might have an interest in the future, and put things on hold for those who aren't wanting to put things on hold themselves. But the challenge is, it's just that pace of which how you introduce things to the patrons, especially at the senior centers. We recently started, like I said, in the last few months, going to the Peaks, and they're actually a memory care center. So our challenge there has been learning to work with the folks who are either in early onset dementia or Alzheimer's. And so, but there is a joy that they are, they see us, and we might have similar conversations, but we do a lot of reminder calls with that, with the senior center that has the memory care. It just helps to at least let them know that we're coming, and that consistency has helped in there. But yes, I would say it's more just the small amount of only being able to carry so many books, and then the staff of having to do the back and forth. We do look forward to, we've talked about having a bookmobile at some point for sure.
Thank you. Claire, do you find that's a similar challenge you have, or do you want to expand upon that?
Sure. So yes, staffing. I think that's a fairly consistent challenge across the board for libraries in general. Specifically for us, so it feels like we've been planning for our bookmobile forever, but in reality, the opportunity for it came up very, very suddenly. We heard about a matching grant from a community foundation, applied for it, the city agreed to get it. And so we sort of jumped in with both feet without a lot of time to really plan all of the logistics around it, because we had to strike while the iron was hot. And so as I mentioned earlier, we've now hired a full-time bookmobile assistant who will start soon, but we needed to get the program going as quickly as possible to show all of the stakeholders how successful it will be. And so the staffing has been a significant challenge. When I was initially doing our delivery service 8-9 years ago, there wasn't a lot else on my plate. And now I do the programming and outreach throughout adult services. So even as our service has become much larger, my time to dedicate to it has become smaller. And so it definitely has been finding that balance. When we did the pop-up library, it was always 2 staff, and now it's just me. When we get the library assistant, it'll be 2 staff for a while, but then eventually it will go back to being just that person for the majority of the stops, because we just don't have enough people to dedicate to it. And so the challenge has been figuring out what our procedures are going to be, acknowledging that we're not going to get an additional staff person. So how do we make sure that our practices and our procedures are manageable and respectful of the capacity of one person? Because we want this service to be hugely successful, but also completely sustainable. We don't want to build it up to a point that everybody in the community loves it, but we're burning out our staff. Right. And so that is something that Stacy, Walter, and I are very cognizant of and spend a lot of time discussing as we're thinking through how quickly do we add stops, how often can we reasonably expect to go out, how much time do we need to build in between stops to allow for the collection to be refreshed, all of those things. Even joking about the recent news about the Amazon drivers and the bathroom breaks, and thinking, okay, yeah, we really need to be sure that we are keeping that in mind, and that no staff member thinks that there's an expectation that they will push themselves past comfortable physical limits, because we all want to provide service. And sometimes we have to be reminded that you have to draw boundaries to those services. So I think that's the challenge that we're trying to wrestle with now, is making sure that what we build is beneficial for all parties concerned.
That's some really good points. Thank you, Claire. Adam and Stacy, would you like to add any specific challenges that you've encountered in Aurora?
So I think that this is similar to what's gone on before, but one of ours has been the collection itself, and rotating that out for much of the time that we've been active, which my knowledge of that always goes back a couple of years, but I know before that as well, much of the collection used for the outreach stuff specifically was floating within the rest of it. And so we had issues with just having enough material for some of the stops that we were trying to go to. Staffing has always been a problem. One of the things that's not always looked at when it comes time to have that discussion is that there's more to events and outreaches than just the time you spend on site. There's the planning that goes into it, that if you are doing something that requires work afterwards, all of that is staff time, all of that is resources. That is something that has always been a problem for us, as well as I'm sure most of the folks on this call. A tertiary issue we've had is some of these places we go to have their own rules and things they would like us to do. I touched on that earlier with the military base, but the senior homes also have their own procedures. The schools have their own procedures now in many cases. And so that's something else that we have needed to be cognizant of and prepared for whenever we go to events.
I think added to that is, with the staffing, we try to be really cognizant of avoiding programming anything for our team on Mondays. That's kind of our, like, we can reload, we can pull holds, we can do the things that we need to do to make sure that we're able to stay ongoing. Stacy really oversees a lot of our reservations for both the Bookmobile and for other engagement opportunities that we have with our communities. And Stacy's great about, if there's something on the calendar or if it's a Monday, we're like, do we really want to do this? And we've really had to come to terms with being okay with saying no. We can't do everything, although we really do try. Our calendar's pretty packed, and we flex a lot of hours, and because that's the other thing, is that a lot of the needs end up happening after hours as well. And so really figuring out, are we able to accommodate it with what we have, including materials and staff, and are we willing to accommodate it? And unfortunately, sometimes it's what's the bang for the buck. Like, you know, if you want us to come on a Saturday and you're going to have 50 people there, it may not, you know, be worth that energy, where someone else comes in and says, well, we've got a 4,000 person event that we would really like library presence at, then we have to weigh those options. So we do try to make sure that we leave Mondays open at least. Often Tuesdays are also fairly open, and most of our rotations, be it the nursing homes, the military base, things like that, we try to put those on a 3-week rotation so that we're not packed doing that all the time.
That's some really great advice, to dedicate at least one day a week of just being in the office and recharging your collection and recharging your staff. I'm gonna go around to Angelique now and say, what other advice that you would give to libraries, big or small, who wants to start putting items in cars and taking it out to people? I'm sorry, you're still muted.
All right, thank you. I would say the advice I would give is definitely be open and talk to your community partners, find out where there is those gaps, find out what their requirements are of you all, and then look at the time that you have and where can you be consistent, that you can plan out. Like I look and I plan out the whole year from January on to December so that I can make sure that we have the staffing for it. And I know that's really hard to do, but it really helps to keep it blocked off so that it doesn't get absorbed into other things. And it just shows that the community that we are wanting to provide those services that they are asking for, because we do, you know, we go to the laundromat, we go to domestic violence shelter, we go to a temporary housing shelter. That these are places a lot of folks are moving through on a regular basis, but it shows if we're consistent with them, if you can show consistency, really, there's a lot of respect in the community. It's very appreciative. So start small and, you know, ask your community where it's needed.
Thank you. Consistency is really important. It's just really essential, that I have found, that people can know that you're going to be there no matter what. Do you have any, what advice you'd have, Claire, for all libraries across the state who want to start a similar program?
I would reflect back to what the speaker from the first half talked about. Start with the people who already know you and already use services, because you have sort of a built-in audience, and identify some of those groups who, you know, for us, Littleton has a significant senior population, and talking to the folks who made major efforts to come into the library, finding out where they lived and learning that they would love it if we could come to them because the transportation was harder, meant that we didn't have to, you know, start from fresh, go into a place and try to make people understand what libraries did and what we could do. And we already had our advocates and our ambassadors there, and then they started spreading the word. And so building up from that ready-made audience, and then when you're ready to expand out to the people who don't know about you, you've already had a chance to really iterate your service with a very understanding audience who's predisposed to love you and love what you do, and will give you that feedback about, here's what works, here's what doesn't, I really wish you could do this, so that when you go out to the harder audience of people who don't know about the library or are resistant to the library, you've already got a product that's pretty polished, and you got your spiel down, and you're ready to go with all your systems in place. So that would be one half of it, and the other half, just like Angelique said, start small. Don't worry if it's just taking 50 books out each month to a local nursing home and talking to them for an hour about the books. That's a really good way to get your feet wet. I don't think we would have been successful with the Bookmobile if we had tried to go straight to it from that small service, if we hadn't had the intermittent pop-up library service, because there were mistakes that we made with the pop-up library that would have been hugely expensive if we had made those kinds of mistakes with the Bookmobile collection. You know, authors that we assumed would be really popular that never circled. Well, if we spend a lot of money getting fancy new copies of all of their books for the Bookmobile, that would be very different from pulling them off the regular shelf to take out once a month. So don't feel like you're lagging behind if you're spending a couple of years with each of these smaller models of service. And then when you realize that you've reached absolute capacity with that service, that's the time to move up to the next level.
Wow, thank you. Adam and Stacy, you already gave us some great, and Minda, already gave us some great advice about having a specific day to recharge. Do you have any other advice for libraries across the state?
One of our biggest wins right now also is looking for that low-bearing fruit. And I think that goes along with what Angelique was saying or what Claire was saying. Because we operate out of the city, we have other departments in the city that are already, they have the money. They're already putting on massive thousands of dollar events. And we're like, hey, can we have a table out there? And now all of a sudden you've got 500 people at a library table. So they don't mind the partnership. We're doing, and that's just with the table. That's just, you know, you can do library sign-up cards there. That's some of that community engagement piece without the Bookmobile. With the Bookmobile, and you could do this without the Bookmobile as well, but our pros team is putting on movie nights in the parks. And we were like, hey, do you guys mind if we show up like an hour before your movie and bring the Bookmobile and let people check it out? And I was like, we'll let them know there's going to be a movie in the park here in about an hour. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So they are allowing us to like put up that space there. And then when we got there, they're like, hey, do you guys have the flyers for your summer concerts you're doing? And I'm like, yeah, that's great. They're like, we have people asking about it. So we've created these partnerships within our community system with the teams that have the money and have the means. So we will ride on their tails as long as we possibly can because it works. So that's my other like biggest piece of advice is find that low-bearing fruit. We have, you know, our Aurora Public Schools kickoff. They see 10,000 people in a 2-hour period of time. We put a table out there, boom, that's huge numbers. Adam, Stacy, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that as well.
So one thing that I think was touched on a little bit is narrowing the focus. It's getting really good at whatever program you start with and then expansion from there. And sometimes that doesn't always look the same program to program. I think a really big deal is quality of interaction. All the people in the world doesn't mean a ton if they're not actually interacting with you. So it's narrowing your program to very much suit the needs of who you're trying to reach to, and then being willing to adapt everything about your approach based on what they give you back. And I think that naturally builds from there. And then you're talking about more programs, more resources, et cetera, as Minda and others have touched on. So that would be my advice, is just find that one thing that you're passionate about, narrow the focus, and then get extremely good at that.
Really great advice. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to all our audience. If anyone has any questions for our panelists, feel free to put it in the chat and I can read it out loud, or just unmute your mic and speak. I think it was quite the great discussion that it touched on so many things. So thank you for all our panelists. I'm saying thank you, but if anyone does have any questions, just speak up. Could our panelists also put down their contact information into the chat? So if people do have questions later, they can contact you. There's also a lot of great links in the chat, a lot of great images in the chat for the different new bookmobiles that Bemis and Aurora have. So you're welcome to take a look at those. And again, thank you so much for all our panelists. Thank you, Angelique. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Minda. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Stacy. Everything you shared has been really amazing, and I hope people can see how it doesn't take much to bring the library to people, and it's amazing to see where that can take us.
Thank you for the invitation, Jacob, and for arranging the discussion.
Does anyone have any questions about Rocky Mountain Outreach Interest Group or even ABOS? ABOS is the American Bookmobile and Outreach Association. It's kind of it is a national group that does conferences in the fall. Does anyone know when the conference is this year?
September, I believe.
Yep, it's October.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna let Susan talk about ABOS here.
I can give you the I'm looking them up now.
Ah, someone just
It's
posted
the
in
8th through the
chat.
12th.
Ah,
like-
thank you.
In the middle of October.
So if you enjoyed this kind of presentation, I recommend you check out ABOS, either for their national conference. It has a lot of great panelists and discussions just like this. Or if you're not able to make it to the conference, I definitely hope everyone is signed up with the listserv, which is free. It's a great place to just post all your questions and get answers from people all over the country. And Rocky Mountain Outreach Interest Group also has a listserv. It's very quiet. It's mostly the best way to communicate about our upcoming meetings. So if you are not signed up for that, you can let me know. Just email me and I can make sure you get signed up for that. Or you can just look on the Colorado Virtual Library listserv. And we are there right along with LibNet and the other great information resources. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please let me know if you have any questions either by email or just speaking up right now. Thank you again for, I keep saying it, but thank you again for our wonderful presenters today. I want to give a loud applause, but I'm worried about my microphone cutting it out. But that was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you all and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, I'm going to post the recordings of our presenters. You'll see a link to those recordings. It'll be a YouTube link. It's actually my personal YouTube. You'll see they'll probably be broken up into the Express Library presentation and our panelists, so you can watch whichever one you'd like. That link will be posted on the Rocky Mountain Outreach Interest Group listserv. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you.